In 7th grade, I went on a school trip called the Coastal Explorer, a tour of historical sites along the Oregon coast. One stop was the Hawthorne Manor, a sprawling old estate rumored to be one of the most haunted places in the state. The place had a dark history, with tales of tragedy and restless spirits. We were in a crowded parlor room, part of a larger tour group, as the guide droned on about the manor's past. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard it, a faint, deliberate tap, like someone striking a single piano key. It happened again, then again. I looked around, but there was no piano in the room. I glanced at my friends nearby. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. They shook their heads, looking at me like I was losing it. "Hear what, Lucas?" one of them asked. The sound came again, sharper this time. "That, the piano sound," I said louder. They just shrugged, smirking. I scanned the room, feeling uneasy, and noticed a woman across the group staring at me. She pointed at herself, then at her ear, raising her eyebrows as if to ask if I heard it too. I nodded, my heart racing. Just then, the guide started telling a story about a young woman who'd lived in the manor decades ago, a pianist who died tragically. Guests often reported hearing her play late at night. A single key struck over and over. I didn't know what to make of it. After the tour, I caught up with the woman as we left the room. "You heard it, right? The piano?" I asked. "Clear as day," she replied, her voice low. "My husband and son didn't hear a thing." I still don't know what to believe, but the memory of those phantom notes lingers. My college library in a small town in Idaho stays open until 1 a.m. for procrastinators like me who wait until the last minute to finish papers. It's a compact building, with most of the books housed in a basement area called the archives, a maze of shelves split into 2 large rooms connected by a long hallway with 4 entrances. Last spring, I was down there around 10 p.m., grinding out a research paper due at 9 a.m. I was at a study desk, one of only 2 people left in the archives. The other guy, a student I didn't know, was working a few desks away. I was deep in my work, stressed and zoned out, when I heard it, a rapid, deliberate flipping of book pages, like someone was rifling through a stack to make that sharp, whipping sound. It came from the far end of the room. I tried to ignore it, assuming it was some jerk messing around, but it didn't stop. After a few minutes, I'd had enough. I stood up, ready to tell whoever it was to cut it out, but as I took a few steps, the noise stopped dead. I sat back down, annoyed but relieved. 10 minutes later, it started again, louder, like someone was flipping through a massive textbook. The other guy looked up, visibly irritated. "You hear that?" I asked. "Yeah, it's pissing me off," he muttered. He got up and started weaving through the shelves, looking for the source. I joined him, the sound growing louder, unmistakable. We followed it to a corner of the room, each of us on opposite sides of a row of shelves. The flipping stopped as we reached the spot. No one was there. We hadn't seen anyone enter the archives, and we were near the only exits. "Maybe it's the vents or something," I said, trying to convince myself. We went back to our desks, but the moment we sat down, the flipping started again, right next to the other guy's chair. "Screw this," he said, shoving his stuff into his bag and bolting. I was right behind him, heart pounding. I haven't gone back to the archives at night since, not even with other people around. I was in my junior year of high school, living in a house in rural Montana. My bedroom had a weird layout. Across from my bed was a small alcove, completely dark because the closet blocked both the ceiling light and any moonlight from the window. One night, I was trying to sleep but couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't just nerves. It felt heavy, malicious, like whatever was out there meant me harm. I opened my eyes and glanced at the alcove. There, in the shadows, was a faint, hazy outline, darker than the rest of the room. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks, but my skin prickled with goosebumps. I closed my eyes, trying to force myself to sleep, but then I heard it, a creak, like someone stepping on the old wooden floor. My eyes snapped open. The shadow was gone from the alcove, but now it was in the opposite corner, closer to my bed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I pulled my blanket over my head, trembling, and stayed like that, crying quietly, praying whatever it was wouldn't come closer. I know I didn't imagine it. Even now, the memory of that malevolent presence sends shivers down my spine. My parents were on their honeymoon in St. Augustine, Florida, in the early 90s. When they arrived at their hotel, they were assigned a non-smoking room. But since my dad smoked, they requested a switch. The new room was on a different floor, but as they stepped off the elevator, the hallway reeked of fresh paint. A painter was working nearby, his supplies scattered around him, brushing a wall with steady strokes. My parents nodded at him as they passed. "Evening," my dad said casually. The painter didn't look up, didn't acknowledge them at all. When they reached their room, the paint smell was so strong it stung their eyes, making it impossible to stay. They decided to head back to the front desk to change rooms again. At the desk, they explained the issue. The clerk looked puzzled. "That's strange. There's no painting scheduled on that floor today," she said, but she switched their room anyway. When they returned to grab their bags, the painter was gone. No supplies, no trace, and the paint smell had vanished completely, like it had never been there. My parents were spooked but brushed it off and settled into their new room. The next morning, as they headed to breakfast, they overheard a tour guide in the lobby talking about their original floor. Apparently, years ago, a maintenance worker painting the hallway had fallen into an open elevator shaft and died. My parents aren't big on ghost stories, but that experience left them rattled, with no explanation for what they'd seen or smelled. It was a wild, stormy night in early April, the kind I loved as a kid, thunder crashing, lightning splitting the sky. I was 15, living with my mom in a small house outside Tacoma, Washington. She was working a night shift at the hospital, so I was home alone, binge-watching old movies. After wrapping up another viewing of The Shawshank Redemption, I decided 1 a.m. was late enough to crash. The storm was still raging, and I loved falling asleep to the sound of rain. But then I heard it, a sharp tap against my bedroom window. It wasn't rain, it sounded deliberate, like a pebble hitting the glass. I froze, hoping it was just the storm. Then it happened again, louder. My heart raced. "Mom," I whispered, knowing she wasn't home. Another tap, then another, faster now. I realized whoever was out there knew I was awake. The TV's glow had probably been visible through the window before I turned it off. I wanted to ignore it, praying they'd leave, but the taps kept coming. The rain slowed, and I heard something else, a low rumble, like a car engine idling in the street. Then a louder thud hit the window, hard enough to rattle the frame. That was it. I jumped out of bed, ready to call 911, but as I ran downstairs, I glanced at the front door. Through the small window at the top, I saw a face pressed against the glass, staring inside with what looked like a twisted grin. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed the police, my hands shaking. "Someone's trying to get into my house," I whispered. They said an officer was nearby and would be there soon. At the door, the knob rattled, followed by a heavy thud, like someone was trying to break it down. I grabbed a kitchen knife and shouted, "The police are coming." The noises stopped abruptly. I hid in my room, listening as the car engine revved and faded into the distance. A few minutes later, sirens approached and the doorbell rang. I described the face as best I could, but I hadn't dared look out the window to see the vehicle. The police found nothing, and I still regret not taking that quick glance. I'll never know if they wanted to rob us, or something far worse. This didn't happen to me, but to my cousin, Jake, and it still gives me chills. One night in late 2018, Jake was video chatting with his girlfriend, Lily, around 2 a.m. in their hometown of Bend, Oregon. Lily was begging him to come over and spend the night, but Jake wasn't keen on driving so late. "Come on, it's not that far," Lily teased. During their chat, Jake noticed the closet door behind her was slightly ajar. "Hey, your closet's open," he pointed out. Lily glanced back and shrugged. "It's nothing. Probably just didn't close it right." They kept talking, ignoring it. About 20 minutes later, Jake saw the door creak open a bit more. "Lily, your closet's moving again. Is your brother messing with you?" he asked, half joking. "No way. He's at a sleepover," she said, laughing it off. "It's probably the window. There's a draft." Another half hour passed, and then it happened. The closet door swung wide open, and a figure stepped out, moving quickly out of Lily's room. Jake's heart stopped. "Lily, someone's in your house. Lock your door and call the police," he shouted. Lily turned, saw the open closet, and screamed, slamming her bedroom door shut and locking it. "I'm home alone," she cried, her voice shaking. Jake called the police while speeding to her place. When he arrived, the front door was wide open. He ran to her room, banging on the door. "Lily, it's me," he called, but she was too terrified to respond. When the police arrived, they found her curled up in the corner, trembling. She later told them she'd come face to face with a stranger at her doorway before locking herself in. The police found no one, but the thought of someone hiding in her closet, watching her, still haunts them both. The first time my family went camping was in the summer of 2009, when I was 17. My younger siblings, twins who were 10, had begged us to go, so we drove out to a remote forest in eastern Oregon. We didn't bother with a campground. My dad just pulled over on a quiet dirt road, and we hiked about a mile into the woods to a small clearing. We set up 2 tents, one for me and the twins, another for my parents. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sleeping bag felt like lying on bare dirt, and I tossed and turned for hours. My siblings were out cold, their soft breathing the only sound in the tent. Then I heard it, the slow, deliberate unzip of our tent. I looked up and saw a head poke inside, just a dark shape against the faint starlight. "Dad," I whispered. The head pulled back. "Dad," I said louder, confused. The figure moved away quickly, leaving the tent flap open. Thinking it was one of my parents checking on us, I crawled out and went to their tent. I unzipped it and found them both asleep in their sleeping bags. I shook my dad awake. "Did you just check on us?" I asked, my voice shaky. "No," he mumbled, half asleep. I woke my mom, hoping it was her. "I haven't left the tent," she said, groggy but certain. My stomach dropped. Someone, a stranger, had opened our tent and looked inside. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with thoughts of who, or what, was out there in the dark. A few years ago, my wife and I took our fishing boat out for a weekend trip off the coast of Maine. The first day was perfect, decent catch, clear skies. That night, we played cards below deck, music humming in the background, laughing like we didn't have a care in the world. The second night, though, things took a turn. We were below deck again, no music this time, when we heard the low rumble of a boat motor. We rushed outside to see a battered old skiff idling right in front of our bow. No lights on, just a dark silhouette against the water. A man, maybe in his 40s, with a scruffy beard and a worn trucker hat, was at the helm. I stepped closer. "You okay? Need help?" I called out. He looked at me, his face barely lit by our deck light. "Got any spare fuel?" he asked, his voice flat. I apologized, saying we didn't have any extra. "You low on gas? Need a lift to shore?" I offered. He shook his head. "Nah, I got plenty." An awkward silence hung in the air. My wife and I exchanged glances, wondering why he'd asked for fuel if he didn't need it. The way he stared at me, unblinking, sent a chill down my spine. Finally, he spoke again. "Catch much today?" I kept it polite, despite the growing unease. "Not much. Slow day." I asked how he was navigating in the dark without lights, but he just chuckled, like I'd told a bad joke. "Nice meeting you folks," he said, turning his boat and vanishing into the black void of the ocean. My wife was shaken. "I thought he was gonna rob us," she whispered. I didn't say it out loud, but something about him felt wrong, showing up in the middle of nowhere, alone, in that beat-up boat. We turned off our lights and sailed a few miles west, hoping to lose him. Around 3 a.m., I woke to my wife's piercing scream. I shot upright and saw a figure standing at the foot of our bed. I lunged for him, but he was out of the cabin before I could get up, the sound of that same motorboat roaring to life outside. We sailed straight back to shore and reported it to the Coast Guard, but they never found him. The thought of what he wanted, or what he might have done, still haunts us. It was late October, just before Halloween, and my friends and I were gathered in a basement in Boise, swapping ghost stories. My friend Clara hesitated when it was her turn, saying she had a story about her parents' first date that she didn't like to tell because it was true. We pushed her to share, and she finally gave in. Her parents had gone on a sweet but slightly awkward first date in the summer of 1998. As the night wound down, her dad, Michael, suggested a late-night walk along a trail in the Sapphire Mountains. He'd hiked there before and knew the area well. They drove to the trailhead, parked, and started walking under a starlit sky, the moon barely a sliver. A few minutes in, Michael got a bad feeling. The path ahead dipped into a grove of pines, where the darkness seemed to swallow everything. He brushed it off, chalking it up to the late hour, and kept going. But the feeling grew stronger, like a warning pulsing in his chest. They stepped into the shadowed grove, and his foot brushed against something soft on the path. It wasn't a branch or a rock, it felt wrong, alive. The unease hit him like a wave, and Clara's mom felt it too. "We need to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now." Without another word, they turned and hurried back to the car, not looking back. Years later, now married, they were watching a documentary about a notorious killer. When asked about the closest he'd ever come to being caught, he described a night in the Sapphire Mountains. He lured a woman to the trail, killed her, and left her body in the path. As he hid in the trees, he heard footsteps approaching. He watched a man stumble over the body, pause, and then turn back without investigating. Michael and Clara's mom froze as they realized they'd been those footsteps, inches from a killer hiding in the dark. When I was about 6 years old, we lived in a creaky old house in a small town called Willow Creek, nestled in the hills of Northern California. My bedroom was tucked away on its own floor, a strange little space that wasn't even meant to be a bedroom. It felt more like an afterthought, tacked onto the attic with a steep, narrow staircase leading up to it. The previous owners had used it as a storage room for their kids' toys, and it came with a massive closet built into the attic's slanted ceiling. You had to climb a set of rickety wooden steps to reach it, and the heavy sliding door opened to a space crammed with my old toys, stuffed animals, and random junk from my early years. Being so isolated from the rest of the house, with that looming closet, always made me uneasy, especially at night. One stormy evening in late October, I was lying in bed, my heart still racing from a horror movie I'd watched with my family earlier. I couldn't shake the creepy images from my mind. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a faint, unmistakable sound from the closet. It was like one of my old battery-powered toys had sprung to life, buzzing and clattering. I bolted out of bed, my bare feet slapping the cold floor, and sprinted to my parents' room downstairs. "There's something in my closet," I cried, trembling. They sighed, trying to calm me down. "It's just your imagination, Ethan," my mom said softly. "There's no one up there." They saw how shaken I was and let me sleep in their bed that night. The next evening, I'd almost forgotten about it, until it happened again. This time, it was the sound of my plastic building blocks spilling across the closet floor, a loud cascade of clicks and clatters. I froze for a moment, then ran to my parents' room again. "It's the closet again," I pleaded. My dad was losing patience. "Ethan, enough. It's just stuff falling over," he grumbled. But he let me crash in their room once more. The next morning, my mom and I climbed the steps to check the closet. Sure enough, a pile of blocks was scattered across the floor, the container tipped over. I was convinced someone had been in there, but Mom brushed it off. "See? It just fell. Nothing to worry about," she said, her tone reassuring but firm. That night, my dad locked their bedroom door, fed up with my nonsense. I lay in my bed, wide awake, my imagination running wild as the wind howled outside. I stared at the closet, waiting, dreading. About an hour passed in eerie silence. Then, with a low, grinding rumble, the closet door slid open, the sound shattering the quiet. Moonlight poured through my window, casting a pale glow on a shadowy figure standing at the top of the closet steps. I let out a scream that could have woken the whole town. My body flooded with terror I can still feel years later. The figure leapt down, bolted through my room, and vanished out the front door. My mom raced upstairs, her face pale, while my dad tore downstairs after the intruder, but they never caught him. The police searched, but found no trace of the man. The thought of someone hiding in that closet, watching me, still makes my blood run cold.